Welcome back to the Old Fashioned Real Estate Show. That's
Brian Leverage.
And I'm
Jeffrey Holtz.
That's so right, Brian. Thank you. Today we're going to talk about partnerships, and about like how you decide what kind of partnerships you should do, if you should structure them, how you should structure them. But be sure to stick around to the end where we share 3 things that you have to watch out for to make sure your partners don't destroy your life. We'll be back after this.
Welcome to the Old Fashioned Real Estate Show, where hosts Brian Leverage and Jeffrey Holtz pour our old fashioned real estate advice.
All right, well, okay, destroy your life might have been a bit of an exaggeration, Brian, but let's talk about partnerships. Have you ever done a partnership?
Couple times.
Couple times.
This is a partnership.
It's true, the Old Fashioned Real Estate Show partnership.
Yep.
Now, when we talk about partnerships, just to be clear, there's different ways to structure them from a legal perspective, and we're not really going to talk about that. This isn't legal advice. We're not saying, hey, you need an LLC, or you need a corporation, or a general partnership, or an LP. I mean, there's all those different structures, and we've talked about some of those things on previous episodes. Today,
consult with your CPA and or attorney for, good advice on how best to structure it, because obviously the situation kind of dictates the type of partnership you may need.
Yeah, but instead what we're going to talk about this episode is whether you should partner or not, and if you should, how do you go about thinking about, and what things are there that you have to consider before entering into that partnership?
Well, what are your goals? That's where you start.
Yeah, that sounds right. So if you were...
that was profound.
I know. So... Brian, if you were approached, say somebody had a deal they wanted to do with you and you've never partnered with them before, maybe you knew them a little bit or whatever, and they said, hey, I've got this great deal and I want to partner with it. What would be some of the first things you would think about?
I would think about why would it be a benefit to me to partner with that person, right? Number one. Number two, the project matters, right? I mean, if you're, if it's a significant ROI, versus something that's less.
So is there enough to split up, right? Because if you're only going to make $1, it's not
really worth your time. Yeah.
But let's assume for a second that the deal makes sense. You like the deal. And let's even assume you know why you want to partner with them, right? They have the deal. You don't have the deal. That's the reason. In that scenario, and you're looking at whether or not you want to enter into a deal, you like the deal, so you want to be in on it. What are you thinking about? Like, what are the risk points? Like, what are the things that you consider when it comes to whether or not you want to actually be in that partnership?
Well, I think what you have to look at is whether or not you can carry the investment on your own. Right? Because what if something happens to that person, number one, right? Like partnerships to me are synergy, or they should be, right? You should be able to complement your partner's weaknesses and vice versa. Now, certainly you can have strengths match strengths and stuff like that. Sure. It shouldn't be opposites and so forth. But, at the end of the day, there are risks, right? Life happens, events beyond our control happen. So you could end up being, the pilot of the whole thing at the end of the day.
Or you could just be in a situation where you disagree on something, right?
Right.
Like that's one thing to think about is like, what if they want to take the project a different direction than you? So you need to make sure you're aligned.
Your philosophies need to match, right? Like, exactly. You need to, I think, both have a mindset towards a similar outcome on the project, exactly. Because, like, when you're looking at something, you're going to come up with an exit strategy, right? You're obviously going to come up with several exit strategies if you're underwriting it correctly, because what happens if your primary exit doesn't go the way you planned, right? And say you're flipping a house, right? Classic example. Well, market, maybe inventory ticked up, and maybe, like right now, interest rates are up, so there's fewer buyers out there, et cetera, et cetera. House doesn't sell, it's sitting, and then you're going, well, what are we going to do here? If your partner was like, well, I've got all my eggs in one basket, and I've got to get my money out, but it's not going to sell, and you're forced with having to cover a mortgage payment on an ongoing basis because you took a loan for the purchase and construction, well, you're going to have to look at some other options, aren't you?
Yeah, for sure you are. So or you're gonna have to be able to bite the bullet and cover that loan payment. That creates one risk point, right? So when you're forming a partnership, you want to make sure it's structured in a way that protects your downside, right? If a partner isn't able to perform for whatever reason, there needs to be a mechanism to dissolve that partnership.
Yeah, strong operating agreement, and it's best to have everything in writing, right? Don't assume, because things, a person's financial situation can change through no fault of your own.
They could go through a divorce. They could. Well, that's happened to a lot of my partners.
Look back at this episode here. So, not only that, but it's also a point where it's like you look at things and you go, okay, like what's their track record look like? What's their experience level in this type of asset or partnership, right?
Right.
And what's and I hate to say it, but you really also kind of have to look at their financial situation too. And I think you need to be willing to be open about your own, because, again,
maybe not super specific, but at least enough information.
Right. You don't need to see all their bank accounts or anything like that, but you got to have a.
But you might, depending on the deal, right? Like there are deals where that can be a thing.
Yeah.
And listen, there's so many ways to slice this, right? Like I know of a young man here in Chattanooga that recently did a deal with another investor that we know, where he got 10% of a deal just to help manage the deal, right? And so now he's a partner. That person has made a decision, the investor that was going to take down the deal on his own, they made a decision that they want to be tied to that person for a long period of time, because they didn't want to hire someone to run that project. They wanted someone that was going to be invested in it, that was going to stay with that deal, right? And there are advantages to that, but there are also some disadvantages to that kind of structure, right? In the case of, say maybe I wanted you to run a deal for me, and I go, here, I'll give you 10% of my deal, right? If later I decide I don't want you running that deal anymore,
can't take that.
That 10%'s done. That's a sunk cost at that point, and I can only do that a few times, and I'm out of equity, right?
Well, what happens if that person, in return for their 10%, doesn't actually meet your expectations either?
Yeah, so you need to be this is where having very clear plans in place makes sense. Now, that isn't to say that that's the wrong structure. There are plenty of reasons why that structure might be the right one. There are also things like a lot of the stuff we do, we're just 50-50 partners. We might do a flip, we buy it together, we divide up the work however we divide up the work. Usually you do it all and I just take the money, and then we split the money 50-50. That kind of partnership.
It's a sweet deal.
Yeah, for you. Yeah, exactly. But the point is, in those kind of 50-50 partnerships, there's defined responsibilities, and usually people are putting in similar cash amounts and things like that. But there are also things like syndications, which we've done episodes on before, where you have both active and limited partners that do much less of the work. They just kind of put their money in and hope it works out, which for the most part it can work out really well. And all these different ways to look at it are just different ways to divide up the deal. And sometimes the real advantage to being in a partnership is you get a deal you couldn't do otherwise. Like that one I explained at the beginning, right, where you like the deal, but someone else controlled the deal.
Yeah. Well, and you asked at the very beginning of this episode, have I ever been involved in a partnership? And I mean, obviously the answer is yes, but if I'm really being open here, almost every deal I've ever done has been in some form of partnership. And the reason for that is scale, right? If you're using your own capital, and again, this is a personal choice. I'm not saying it's a right or a wrong answer, but at the end of the day, if you want to do more deals, you are most likely going to have a finite amount of capital and lending capacity as well, right? Like, just because you've got a great track record and maybe a couple $100,000 doesn't mean you're going to be able to go out and get $20 million in financing. Especially,
and honestly, even if you had $20 million in cash, it doesn't mean you can do an unlimited amount of deals.
Yeah,
right? You might be able to
you
do
could do 20 million in a deal,
or maybe even 50 or 60 million with leverage. But there's a limit to what you can do. And I've said this before. I've actually never done a real estate deal without a partner. Other than my personal residence, I've never owned real estate without a partner. I continue to operate that way, although I'm kind of toying with the idea of breaking down and buying something on my own. But I mean, obviously, I'm super pro partnerships. But I have had some that have gone bad. And that's what I want to, as we get towards the end of the episode now, what are a couple of things that you worry about when you enter into a partnership?
You worry about the other party living up to their end of the responsibilities. And it's up to you guys to define those responsibilities on the front end. Don't make assumptions. I think probably the overarching theme here would be you're not going to be able to plan for 100% of what could happen, but you want to try to plan for at least a majority of things. And it's when you don't plan for that stuff that Murphy's Law is Murphy's Law for a reason, right?
Yeah.
It happens. And then you're trying to figure out and pick up the pieces after the fact, and that's you don't want to. You want to have a clear path, or at least as much.
So
as possible.
The first pitfall that you're really saying is like when bad things happen, you need to have a plan of how the two of you or the three or five.
How do you resolve it?
How do you deal with it? The second thing that can happen, I think, the second real pitfall of partnerships is when you become unaligned, right? Like. We alluded to this earlier, life circumstances change. If you and I buy a property and we plan on keeping it for a long period of time, and then I develop a gambling addiction, and I spend all of my money, and now I'm like, I need some money, and I'm like, Brian, we got to sell this property. We got to sell this property, and you don't want to sell it because you live off the cash flow, or you think it's going to be really great 10 years from now, so you want to hold it. That's a problem.
Yeah.
Right? So we have to have a mechanism that says, what if something changed in our circumstances and one or of the other partners or one of our partners wants out? And in the case of syndications, it's really easy because there's just, they're committed to sticking
it was all spelled out.
Yeah. All written out, really nice thick document. But sometimes if we're doing a deal together, we're just going, okay, let's just do it in this company we already have. We have 3-4 properties in there. There's no real operating agreement for that deal.
Sure.
And if we have a disagreement about how it is, we have to think about how do we resolve that? And we need, for us, it's worked pretty well because we just talk it out. But, like a marriage, and the partnership is like a marriage, right? Sometimes relationships break down and talking it out doesn't work. Hope that doesn't happen for us, buddy.
Therapy.
I feel really tight with you right now, so we're okay at the moment. So that's the second major pitfall of partnerships. Now, what was the third one?
Financial situations.
Yeah, which is kind of related to the second one. But yeah, I mean, for sure, people's finances change. Or they might not comply with something like a banking requirement. A lot of times there's loan covenants that people have to comply with. Maybe they need to maintain a certain amount of cash, and they don't do that.
Or they have to do their taxes in a timely fashion and provide those to the bank, which is literally written into almost every shelf loan doc you sign.
For sure, for commercial loans, that's the case.
A lot of investors take the extension, which is fine. But then there's people that go past the extension and then into next year. And the problem is like when loans are coming up for renewal or they're just in review and you're in a partnership with somebody who hasn't done their taxes, the bank can end up downgrading your loan and you as a borrower as a result of what your partner's doing, not you.
Yeah, and in our case, like if one of our banks that we do a lot of banking with were to downgrade us as a borrower, it would cause problems not just for, like your partner could cause you to be downgraded, which could cause my loan to be downgraded, which could cause like one of my other partners.
Butterfly effect.
Yeah, it's real bad. So you definitely have to, consider these things in advance. So anyway, I think partnerships are great for the reasons that you brought up, primarily because it allows you to scale.
Yes.
That's the main reason why we partner. It allows you to get deals that you wouldn't otherwise get, but there are some risk points that you need to think about.
And there always will be.
There always will be. That's true in life, though.
Yeah.
And that is the secret to investing in real estate, is recognizing that there are two very important things you need to do. One is recognize it's a lot like life, and two, you have to watch the old-fashioned real estate show and share it with all of your friends.
And like and subscribe.
Of course, that too.
We'll see you again next time.